We're talking baseball here on the Baseball Talk Radio Show.
And hello and welcome to another edition of the Baseball Talk Radio Show. Hope everybody enjoyed the week out there. We have turned the corner. We are past the so-called halfway point of the season, heading for the dog days of summer and the trade deadline. And pennant races should tighten up. We've got some good ones going on in the East, in both divisions, as well as the Central's Cleveland starting to pull away in the AL Central, so not much going on there, but there's still a dogfight going on in the NL Central as well as the West Division. So stuff to keep an eye on as we go down the stretch. And how about that All-Star game? Now, the Home Run Derby was pretty exciting. And I kind of like the new format. It's not as clunky, not as long, and we got rid of Chris Berman. That helped too. But it was fun. It was it was enjoyable. Had a good time watching it. The game was a good game, but I think really, I mean, there was some excitement in it, but I think that game in particular pointed out the major problem with baseball today. Too many home runs and strikeouts, and that was the whole game. I mean, out of the 14 runs that were scored, I believe 13 were scored on home runs. There was one sacrifice fly. I mean, guys did not hit. They were striking out, popping up, or hitting home runs, and that's not. I know that people say, "Oh, we love the." Love the action, love the scoring, but you know what? You got to have more scoring and less strikeouts, and it's also a lot of fun to see your team keep hitting doubles and triples and singles, and everybody getting up and running around the bases. That's fun, too. And I don't know, this commissioner, he's making all of these changes to try to get people to make the game, and they're not working. And now they want to do something next year. He has said, Rob Manfred has, that the MLB is apparently looking to make schedules more fan-friendly. This would mean that they would try to concentrate games into Saturday and Sundays by including several two-game weekend series. They play on a weekend now. I don't know what the difference is. So it's a 3-game series, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There was no explanation. Nobody knows what he's talking about or what the purpose would be. But this is just, this guy is probably the worst commissioner I can recall seeing. He's just been terrible, and he's making all of these changes that are just hurting the game instead of helping it. Now he's talking about outlawing possibility of legislation against the shift, and they want a piece of the gambling action now that everybody wants gambling in all the states. Well, but Pete Rose is still sitting on the sideline. I thought it was persona non grata to do some gambling. I don't know. It's just, he did that crazy thing in the minor leagues that they're trying out with if a game goes into extra innings, they put a man on second base. And, yeah, it's cut down on extra inning games, but it doesn't seem fair in a certain way. So, I don't know. A lot of things going on. Now he's talking about he wants to go to 32 teams. 32 teams he wants to go to. And talking about a possibility of Canada and maybe a team in Mexico. Also mentioned Las Vegas, Charlotte, and Portland, and a number of other cities. I don't know. With the possibility of realignment. Now, when they're talking about realignment, folks, they could be talking about doing away with the National League and the American League and combining all the teams together in regional lineups. And I'm not sure if I like that at all. I mean, as a Met fan, I definitely don't want the Yankees in the same division that I am. Why can't we keep things separate? It's worked so many years. And it worked well for so many years. I don't know why that we have to all of a sudden have to change things. So we'll see where all of this going with this commissioner. And then now I read the next big way of technology at the ballpark could be facial recognition, as the MLB and Tickets.com are working with Clear. That's capital CLEAR, to introduce biometric ticketing at participating ballparks in 2019. The new partnership will extend Tickets.com's API to Clear's biometric systems, allowing Clear members who link their Clear profile with their MLB.com account to gain entry with just the tap of a finger, or in the near future, facial recognition. The new biometric ticketing technology will be piloted at select MLB ballparks later this season, with broader rollout to Clear and Tickets.com enabled ballparks beginning in 2019. Tickets.com, an MLB wholly owned ticketing technology company, is the primary ticketing partner for 23 MLB clubs. With its partnership, Clear becomes the official biometric identity and ticketing partner of Major League Baseball. Clear is also working with the MLB to roll out Clear lanes at ballparks hosting MLB Jewel events, offering fans a secure entry experience. This year, these events will include MLB All-Star Week ballpark events at Nationals Park and postseason games at participating ballparks. We are thrilled to partner with MLB to make game days more enjoyable and secure for fans with biometric ticketing, said Karen Seldman Becker, CEO and co-founder of Clear. We look forward to continuing to innovate alongside the league and the sports community to transform the fan experience, from ticketing to concessions and more. So, what does that all mean? I have no idea, but I guess you can just go on your phone and if you have these accounts and they're linked, you can just put your face on the camera and you'll buy the tickets. I don't know. It's crazy, but I guess this is the way we're going. Next, they'll be doing fingerprints. Who knows? All right, let's take a quick break here and come back because I have a great interview with the author about a great new book on Warren Spahn, and it was done the other day, a few days ago, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. So let's break now and come back with that.
We'd love to hear your comments. You can reach Gary at baseballtalkradio.com, or me, Rich at baseballtalkradio.com. We'd love to hear your comments, so send them in. Subscribe to the Baseball Talk Radio show on Stitcher Radio, iTunes, or Podomatic.com. This way you'll never miss an episode. Gary, I think I'm going to go over to baseballtalkradio.com and listen to all the baseball talk shows there. Do you think I can cram it all in on a weekend?
No, I don't think so. It's going to take you quite some time, but there's a little bit of everything there. Cover most of the teams, and Japanese baseball, fantasy baseball, all there at baseballtalkradio.com, the home of great baseball talk shows. And go check it out. It's a great place. And if you'd like to help us out a little bit, you can go to patreon.com, become a sponsor of the show. Help us out. $2 a month, $1 a month, anything you can give it all would be gratefully appreciated, and help us do more of this kind of thing, the video, and expand our capabilities, and maybe some on the road surprises in the summertime. So that's patreon.com/baseball talk. Give whatever you can. We'd greatly appreciate it. Please go and help us out.
You're listening to baseballpodcasts.net.
Wouldn't it be great if you could get a PhD in life through baseball? Welcome to Baseball PhD, a tour company for your brain. 30 major league teams, 100 places to see. Let's touch them all as we make the road trip of a lifetime.
Joining me tonight is the author of a great new book that I think every baseball fan should pick up. It's called Warren Spahn, a biography of the legendary lefty, and it's written by Mr. Lew Freedman. And Lew is the author of over 100 books on sports, of covering all kinds of sports, and he's won tons of journalism awards. He probably needs a addition to his house to have all the awards in it. Lew, welcome to the show tonight.
Thanks for having me. If I have an addition to my house, so nice of you to say that, but it would be for all the books I have.
Okay.
The personal library is the one that's bulgy.
The extensive library. Yeah. So I was on social media the other day, and somebody posed a question: greatest left-handed pitchers of all time, and I'm reading through the thread, and it's this younger generation, Lew. They're naming Randy Johnson, great pitcher, Steve Carlton, all these guys, and I'm waiting for Warren Spahn to come up, and nobody mentioned him, and finally I had to put a comment in.
Wow.
I said, how about Warren Spahn? And he's like this forgotten or this lost in history guy, and I think your book's kind of timely in that way, because when you look at his career, it's just fantastic.
Oh, I'm kind of surprised to hear that he would not even get a mention. But again, you said the younger generation, but still, if I just look at the numbers and nothing else, they would start to look up who Warren Spahn was, because he was that good. The winningest left-handed pitcher of all time. And, he got that late start because he was in World War II. And a lot of people speculated that if he had had a year or two more when he was younger, a couple of years, he might have had 400 wins. And we know the only people that have that are Cy Young and Walter Johnson.
Right. And it's pretty amazing, as you say, 363 wins. He played 21 years, and that's with 3 years out. He lost 3 full seasons with the war. But the thing that strikes me the most was 13 times he won over 20 games. That, to me, is so incredible in, looking at this day and age of baseball, that it just really, I can't even explain it. It's just it's unbelievable stat.
That is an unbelievable, impressive stat. Guys, we've actually had major league seasons where somebody in one of the leagues didn't win 20 games.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody for the whole year. So for him to do that so many times, I mean, that is one of those stats that you don't see people chasing these days, because they don't have the longevity. They don't pitch the complete games.
Mm-hmm.
That's the real thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. And he pitched, I mean, we'll get into that what some people call the greatest game ever pitched, but going back to his career, he started in with the Boston Braves. People may not even remember that they were in Boston at one point in time.
That's true.
And it didn't fare too good in the beginning. In fact, his first manager was Casey Stengel, and he sent him to the minors.
I think Casey did later regret that. but that was a sort of an unpolished Warren Spahn who was young before World War II.
Mm-hmm.
But he did resent it at the time. Yeah. And he did have one of the greatest baseball quotes of all time about Casey Stengel, because Warren, after he left the Braves, ended up with the Mets during their terrible stretch when they were first formed. Mm-hmm. And he said he played for Casey Stengel before and after he was a genius.
And that's a great quote. And of course, Casey was the first manager, you said, of the Mets, and they were pretty awful back then. But colorful, that's one thing they were. And I do remember Warren Spahn pitching for the Mets in '65 for a brief period of time. And, for some reason, I didn't look at the stats, but I do remember him pitching like a gem of a game, one game as a Met he was unbelievable, and it was like the Warren Spahn of old. And but I can't back that up. It just seems to be stuck in my head, so I don't know.
Well, I will say that he didn't have too many of those with the Mets.
No.
He did, as much as I'm a fan of Warren Spahn, that wasn't it.
But he was 45 years old at the time.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. He was going, being very successful well into his 40s.
Right. And that's.
He was pitching. He went through most of his career without pitching a no-hitter, then pitched two. I think the first was when he was 39. But he did win 23 games at age 42.
That's another unbelievable stat about him, though. I mean, who would, and he did not always pitch on some great teams. I mean, there was a couple of good teams he was on, surrounded him. I mean, the pennant-winning teams in Milwaukee were unbelievable with the amount, the 3 Hall of Famers there.
Hank Aaron, Eddie Matthews behind you. 57 and 58, where they won those 2 National League pennants and won a World Series. And of course, those were a couple of his 21 years. But he actually had a stretch of 5 straight 20-something years between the ages of 36 and 40.
And never had any.
And nobody. I mean, of course, nobody's doing that.
Yeah, and never had any arm problems.
No,
no.
That wasn't what got him. I think just old age.
Yeah.
But it did happen fast, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But, he went from 23 wins to a season of 6 and 13.
Mm. Well, like you said, he was in his 40s by then.
Yeah. But he didn't give up faith that year. He thought he still had it. Could have another good winning year, but it didn't happen.
Yeah. And so he comes up after the war. He's a war hero. Was fought in the Battle of the Bulge. Got a Purple Heart.
Got wounded a couple times. Yeah.
Pretty remarkable achievements there that people don't know that aspect of his life.
No. I mean, at that time, there were lots of guys who had come back from the war. So it probably wasn't very much emphasized, especially with a guy who had a lifetime record of 0-0 before the war. He finally makes the team. He's 25 years old, this guy who won 363 games before he won a game. He finishes 8-5.
Right.
And then the next year, he's a star.
Yeah. So, unbelievable.
A lot of good earned run averages, too.
Mm-hmm.
That always gets overlooked. But 3 or 4, maybe times he led the league in ERA, which is not bad.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you know what? The tenacity of the pitching, starting pitchers of those days, and him in particular, a lot of innings.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody throws innings anymore.
Right.
You can be in the middle of having a really good game, and they yank you at 6 2/3 anyway.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I think he won. I got the impression when I was doing research that he won a lot of games late, where in the modern era he wouldn't even be on the mound anymore. Hey, as much of a baseball guy as I am, and I think I know a lot of baseball history and love the sport, there's a ton of guys in the majors right now who pitch middle relief who I've never heard of.
Right. And they change.
If you're not in the hometown of that team, you don't know the name of all these guys who are pitching one inning.
Yep. It just seems to be a trend where we're never going to see this again.
No, a complete game is like winning an award.
Yeah. So he comes back from the war. He rejoins Boston, and 48, as you said, he became a star. 48, I think they won. Was it 48? They won the pennant, and
47 they became a star.
Okay.
But 48 they won the pennant, and actually he had an off year, which is the great irony of it. He won some clutch games, but he only was 15 and 12 that year.
And of course, there was the poem by the sports writer about Johnny Sane and him and
Spahn and Sane and Pray for Rain.
And,
because that showed you that in that era, even the Braves did not have depth in the starting rotation.
And yet, as you point out, I think that they had a couple of the starters that weren't half bad.
But they didn't have them. They weren't big winners. They did, and actually, some of them really didn't have the longevity either. Spahn and Sane.
Yeah. And then,
Spahn, Sane at his best was terrific.
Yeah.
A lot of people argue that Johnny Sane belongs to the Baseball Hall of Fame because he was the best pitching coach of all time. But who gets in the Hall of Fame for being a pitching coach?
That's right.
I always think there should be a hybrid category. The guy won about 150 games, plus everybody says he's the best at this.
Yeah.
Maybe the Veterans Committee someday.
Maybe,
take
a
look at it that way.
You don't even hear his name mentioned anymore, though, and a lot of people. And again, a lot of these guys their names have been lost in history to, even a Lew Freedman or a Joe Adcock, and you just don't hear about these guys anymore. People don't go back and study the history of the game like they should. I grew up with, my parents would talk to me about Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, and we had books in the house, and I got fascinated about that. And John McGraw and Christy Mathewson and all of these guys was just unbelievable. Ty Cobb, those kind of guys. So, but I'm not sure.
And they're fun to read about in a different era of the game. And, Lew Freedman, you mentioned, he won about 210 games.
Yeah, he was.
He was darn good.
Yeah, he was, and he was a tough guy. He didn't take no crap from anybody.
No, him and Don Drysdale, I think, had games where they were ready to hit everybody on the other team.
I was going to say, they were similar. Big, tall right-handers that would, not be afraid to put you on the dirt.
Yeah, and they wasn't as, baseball, the Major League administration didn't really emphasize that as much. It was more seen as part of the game, so the umpires were not, like, right away throwing guys out.
Mm-hmm.
They had a tolerance limit, but
right.
but it was much higher for the poor sake of the batters.
And they had better control, I think, and they knew, they weren't, they kept it within certain bounds. They went headhunting, but they weren't headhunting as much.
Running a body hunt.
Yeah, yeah.
They were going to put it right on your ribs.
Right. Now,
and you're right. They had such good control, they could do it.
Yeah, they could do it, and consistent. So back to Warren Spahn, and not exactly, he wasn't a fireball pitcher, but he kept evolving as he got older. Talk about that a little bit.
He very much. He was not. I mean, he had the basic fastball when he was young, but he's not one of those guys remembered through time as a super fastball pitcher. Heck, Cy Young got his name because it was short for Cyclone, because during a tryout he broke a panel in the wooden fence. Walter Johnson, Bob Feller, but he was not in that kind of class for speed. And one of the interesting things that I came across that I did not know about Warren Spahn when I was doing research for this was him leading the National League in strikeouts 4 years in a row. Granted, there were lower levels than the guys who came along later, 191, 183. But I never thought of him as a strikeout pitcher.
Right.
He just sort of accumulated them as he went. So, and you do associate the fastball with that. But he recognized, in his 30s that he was losing a little bit of speed, and he had to adapt to survive. So he would practice and tinker with things and work on new pitches in the off season. And that's another thing I think that gave him that longevity, that willingness and ability to change.
And of course, he's got that famous on the cover of your book. He's got that famous high leg kick that I'm sure that's what threw batters off.
I always thought, and I think I mentioned in the introduction, that when you had that big foot coming at you, it might have been a distraction to the batter. I don't know. But the first thing you look at was the sole of his spikes.
And he even did a little stint as an actor. He thought he might want to go into acting at one point. Talk about that. He was on an episode of Combat.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of a TV show that you have to be of a certain age to remember, but which was a good one that I watched as a kid.
Yeah.
So I was unaware of Warren Spahn being in any of the episodes back then. He ends up in Hollywood filming a scene where actually he plays a bad guy. He's the enemy. After being a war hero for the United States, he actually has this one TV role where he's playing on the other side, and of course they filmed him when he was on a road trip to California, and of course on a day of a game, I believe, or it could have been an off day, I'm not sure, but they were there for that reason. And of course, he got tons of ribbing and teasing from his teammates going Hollywood. But he, and by all accounts, it was a fine job, but it really didn't open doors long term.
Yeah.
I guess they picked him because he was in World War II, so they figured he'd fit in with the team.
Yeah, he'd know all the right things, the movements and what. Well,
he wasn't one of those guys whose first screen role was playing himself throwing the ball.
Yeah, like a lot of guys did, and of course back in the '60s, there was a lot of them, mostly Dodgers that did appear on a lot of shows, playing themselves. Leo DeRocha and Drysdale, just a bunch of them used to show up on different shows. Mr. Ed, I think Leo DeRocha was on, and the Munsters. So,
and they were, they were right there.
Yeah. So,
I know that there was a stretch, way even earlier than that college athletes at Southern Cal used to work summer jobs in the movie business. Used to come up a lot. There was a pipeline of sorts.
Yeah.
And then, or maybe when they were in the minors too. It seems to me Bill Sharman, the basketball star, did that too.
Right.
Of course, John Wayne was a football player at USC.
That's
before
true.
Before he was John Wayne.
That's right. He was still Marion
Morrison.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, now we're showing our age, Lou.
Pardon me?
Now we're showing our age.
All the shows you mentioned would.
Yeah, all back in the '60s and '50s and whatnot.
Right. I mean, I heard of them even if I wasn't a steady customer. But I mean, I don't know who else you might be talking to in their 30s who would say, was that?
Yeah, exactly.
So
They win the world champ. They win a pennant in '57, and win the championship for the city of Milwaukee. And they were all very happy to be there. And they make the move to Milwaukee, and he had just opened up a restaurant. Warren Spahn did in Boston, and didn't seem to bother him.
not good timing.
Yeah. But they win the World Series, and he's finally got a ring.
Very happy about that, because his only previous chance was a decade earlier, and something he really coveted. He wanted to. People got to realize the Cy Young Award was very new,
Right.
and first couple of years of it, it went to just one person instead of both leagues.
Mm-hmm.
It quickly changed, but so pitchers didn't always aspire to that at that time period, because it wasn't as prestigious as it is right now. But the World Championship was what he wanted. He wanted that ring, and he was as happy as anybody else that you might think. And then they repeated it with the pennant, but didn't win the World Series. And there were a couple of years in there that people thought they should have won the pennant. And next year was one of them. 59, where they lost the playoff to the Dodgers. And then the Dodgers won their first World Series after moving to Los Angeles over the White Sox. That's the first World Series I ever remember watching, speaking of age.
Mm-hmm.
And they were in the Los Angeles Coliseum with a short porch in left field.
Right.
The people would hit 260-foot home runs over left field there. But so he didn't get another chance after those 2 years. It was fulfilling to the point that they did it. There were a lot of people who thought that Braves team was so loaded in the 50s that maybe they should have picked up one or more extra.
And, of course, he gets to the 60s, and he's a little older now. And we just passed the 55th anniversary of the what some people call the greatest game that was ever played. Marichal versus Spahn. I mean, the numbers on this thing is just incredible as well. 16 innings, 4 hours and 10 minutes, and the game was a 1-0 game. Take us through that a little bit.
Well, the statistic that I find even more boggling was that they each threw over 200 pitches.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, imagine that these days. But I know Juan Marshall and have written a book about him as well, and visited him in the Dominican when we were doing it. So I have heard it directly from his mouth, his viewpoint of what was going on at the time. But the two of them engaging in this, they both ended up being Hall of Famers. The game, 16 innings, 1-0, just goes on and on. And at that point, Warren Spahn is in his 40s. He's nearing the end of his career. And Juan Marshall is in his 20s. And he's a young guy. And they each made a comment that was virtually the mirror image. Because inning after inning goes by, and even then, no matter how well you're pitching, the manager didn't want to leave you in there forever.
Right.
And he wanted to take these guys out. One on each side, the manager of the Giants, the manager of the Braves. And he would go out there, and Juan Marshall would say, I'm not coming out of this game until that old man leaves. And then the manager of the Braves would go out to Spahn, and he refused to give him the ball and say, I'm not coming out of the game until that young whippersnapper leaves. So they were thinking the same way, the same kind of grit, determination. I'm finishing this sucker no matter what. And I'm not giving up if he isn't giving up. So it was kind of amusing to hear that part of it. But it was an epic game. And the pitch counts alone are just absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
I can't remember who it was. One of them, I think, was in the 220 range.
Yeah, Marichal was 227 and Spahn was 201. Unbelievable.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're never going to see that again.
No, and it's just and those were were, I mean, the lineups were pretty darn good on both teams. I mean, you're talking about a Giants team with Mays, McCovey, you know,
Right, they were not slouches.
yeah. And the Giants had just come off a pennant winner the year before, I believe. Was it 62 they won?
Yes.
So they
That
had
was the year McCovey hit the line drive
Right.
to second base. That was the end of the series.
right.
He had spent the rest of his life saying, "How come not one more foot to the right?"
And wasn't there some controversy in that 16-inning game as well with McCovey? Did he not hit a ball that he thought was fair, and they called it foul?
Yeah, he also forevermore thought it was a legitimate game with him. But if anybody remembers the game, they remember the pitching. They don't remember any of the hitting.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah.
But it was quite. I mean, first of all, you don't even get that many 16-inning games a year.
Yes.
And to have both sides pitchers go the distance was just epic.
It's just an unbelievable, and I wonder if there's any video at all of that game, because in those days, again, they didn't televise the games like they do today.
Well, it's funny because sometimes I look for stuff and think it's never going to be there, and there is stuff, and other times I am shocked to see, a 1930s Joe Louis heavydweight fight or something, So it's certainly unpredictable.
Yes, certainly.
I don't know, another thing about people's age, people don't remember that there was a 3 or 4 year period around the very early 60s where they actually had 2 All-Star games a year.
Right.
So that always confuses the number of times someone was selected for an All-Star game, because it could have been twice a year.
Yeah, I remember that. That was quite some thing going back in the day.
Yeah, I have no idea why they tried it, but I don't think it was that big a hit.
No, I don't think. And I seem to recall. I don't know. They felt somebody got gypped or something, or guys were not getting on, so they figured they'd have 2 games. I can't remember the circumstances, but there was. But it wasn't very long.
Experiment, really.
Yeah. I guess they thought.
But Spahn was involved in that. So.
Right. And then, as we said earlier, he comes to the Mets. He's near the end of his career. He's a pitching coach / pitcher. Struggles. Gets now. What were the circumstances that he left Milwaukee?
Oh, they finally decided he was too old.
Okay.
And he had a season that went 6-13 with a 5.29 earned run average. That seemed to prove their case. But he kept saying, "I think I got some more pitching in me, and I want to keep going." So that's where as you said, the pitching patch / pitching coach thing came up with the Mets. But I always thought that was more of a sham, that he wasn't really going to be much of a pitching coach, and he just wanted to throw.
Yeah.
And then, then that was the second year in a row that it wasn't good, 4-12. So that's really how, that by then it was clear. Even though he refused to believe it, and ended up even with the Giants for a little bit of the same season after that. And he went 3-4 with the Giants, and his earned run average was much better. So he comes out of 65, still looking for a team. He didn't want to retire, but the phone never rang after that.
Yeah. And he ended
he's
up
44. And had 2 bad years in a row.
And he ended up pitching in the Mexican League for a brief period of time.
Very brief, yes, very brief. He was ready. He never wanted to stop. and then of course he became a pitching coach for real. So, and stayed in the game and quite a bit. I managed in the minors in AAA in Oklahoma, where he was living. He had moved. He had grown up in Buffalo, but after he got married, lived the rest of his life in Oklahoma,
Yeah,
and closer to Tulsa than Oklahoma City.
and he was a rancher there, correct?
Yes, he had his own ranch, and until the last couple of years, I think, of his life, he was in the nursing home when they'd sold the ranch. But visitors to the house would say it's like a memorabilia museum. He had saved everything.
Wow, that's
He was
pretty.
one of those guys that had it all,
Yeah,
and didn't get rid of it, didn't throw it out.
it's very funny that you mentioned that, because I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to actually go to Ed Kranepool, the ex-Met, to go to his house and view some of his memorabilia. So that was pretty neat too.
Yeah, this, and of course, again, if you appreciate history, it's always nice to see things like that.
And he gets
And also know about guys who also didn't just get rid of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's you often wondered what why would you get rid of it? But sometimes space is an issue as well as other things. But you got to keep some of that important stuff.
I mean, you hear once in a while, though, about people, and I just encountered an athlete the other day who I was talking to here in Wyoming. He was a rodeo person, and she gave away some of her championship buckles to family. So you can see that.
Yeah, at least she kept it.
Yeah,
yeah. It stayed in the family at least.
Right, and they might be more appreciated if Grandpa had this. And Grandpa did this. That kind of stuff.
So he gets elected to the Hall of Fame in '73. Well deserved. And there's a statue of him in Atlanta where he never played, but the Braves honoring their history. What was his thoughts on having a statue of himself, or was?
Oh, he was pretty much near the end, getting more feeble, and he appreciated that. And even though he, in the beginning, it was like he was not one of those guys that was happy that the team left Milwaukee and went to Atlanta. Mm-hmm. But, after all the years passed, this was much, much later in life, if you're going to have a statue, it's going to be where the team is.
Right.
So there was, and the guy who did it, there is a statue of Spahn in Oklahoma, and it was done by the same guy. So that was, there was a connection there, too. But he was very, Spahn was very responsive to appearances and making friends and doing events in Oklahoma during the times he was there. And they had an Oklahoma Sports Museum as well. Again, he was in the Hall of Fame and museum, both, and he was in that. And this same sculptor made a statue for them, too, of Spahn. So it wasn't necessarily a stretch by that point, but I think he was pretty happy about it, that the Braves were still remembering him. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a statue of him with a Hiroshima Toyo tarp, though. Last I checked, anyway. So.
You never know. Maybe they'll do it someday, right?
Maybe. But I haven't found any indication that it's up right now. So.
Well,
could be that ship sailed.
It could be. It was just an incredible career, just unbelievable. And again, as we've talked about, the stats are just unbelievable, and you cover everything so well in this book. It's so fascinating, and it's such an easy read that I recommend everybody pick it up. Warren Spahn, a biography of the legendary lefty. And what are you working on next, Lew?
Well, I just got a couple of deals, but in 1980, I was with the Philadelphia Inquirer when the Phillies won the World Series, and I was a close observer of that, was there the night they won it, wrote the Mike Schmidt MVP story, and the 40th anniversary of that is coming up. And so I am going to try doing a book on that. I just happened to be in Las Vegas and visited with Pete Rose a couple of weeks ago, who was a big, fixture on that team. So that's one thing that's coming. I have an Ernie Banks book that's already finished that's coming out, and maybe this fall, I think. I don't know. They haven't let me in on the exact timetable yet. That's and people who don't know about the big book business don't know exactly how it works with that. But I kind of roll with it, like that. So, and Ernie, I knew a little bit in Chicago when I worked there, and had a couple of very humorous conversations. Ernie Banks was a fun guy to talk to, and he never wanted to just jump into the conversation. Ernie was always asking questions about your love life and things like that. Wanted everybody to be happy. And so one time I was talking to him, and it was in, I guess, early February, and he wanted to know what I was getting my wife for Valentine's Day. He kept urging the box of chocolates on me, but my wife doesn't like chocolate, so I told him I was going to have to settle for flowers. So anyway, he also said I should start wearing bow ties, which my answer to that was, they look good on you, Ernie, but I don't think it would be good on me. So, and bow ties are almost as rare as a complete game.
Yeah, right. Though I see some of these younger guys bringing it back a little bit, but I don't know.
I never see. I will say this: the high school swim team where I am in Wyoming did trot out a bow tie look for road trips.
Okay,
he's in the school colors, which I thought was marvelous. I even wrote a whole story about it.
There you go. Well, Lew, this has been a great.
That was their attire for their uniform for the road, for the bus rides.
This has been a great pleasure, and I'm so glad we finally got to make the connection. And
yes. Well, thank you very much.
And I hope we can do it again on the Ernie Banks. Talk about Ernie Banks the next time.
Anytime. I can give you, if you want, my direct email or anything, whatever you want.
Well, hold on. I'll take a break here, and you can give it to me as soon as I stop recording.
Sounds good.
All right. I'll be back right after this.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for interesting baseball talk, opinions, and history.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for barbecue recipes, tips, and interviews from the world of barbecue. If you like baseball and if you like barbecue, then tune in to Baseball and BBQ. Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and BaseballTalkRadio.com, along with Mets Musings and other great baseball podcasts.
And I'm back. Let me see if I can find myself there. There we are. And one more story before we go. This is something you don't hear a lot of, so I wanted to get this out. The Fresno Grizzlies of the Class A in the Pacific Coast League and concessions partner Pro Sports Catering are reducing food prices at Chukchansil Park, including the cost of 8 of the most popular and highest sales items. The price reductions are already in effect for home games. How many times you heard of concessions going down in price? But it's all about making it better for families. The franchise new owners, Fresno Sports and Events, have been focused on improving the fan experience at Grizzlies home games and are already offering the lowest beer price, $5 for a 20-ounce draft. In all of AAA baseball, if not all of minor league baseball, making an entire night for a family of 4 plus more affordable. And it certainly is, and I hope everybody picks up that trend. Maybe that'll pick up the attendance in Major League Baseball. You know, they say it's flagging a little bit, it's down, but maybe it's not game. Maybe the prices have something to do with it as well. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week. I hope that you will enjoy the show. And join me the next time on another edition of the Baseball Talk Radio Show.